very lucky to have here today as our speaker, author, Randy Susan Meyers. The most important thing about Randy, I met her for the first time in May, is that she's a really nice person. To me, that's much more important than whether she's a good writer. And actually, Randy is not a good writer. She is a superb writer.
Accidents of Marriage. This book is about that kind of relationship, that kind of marriage where you don't know what your night is going to be like until you hear the doorknob turn. It's about having to measure the molecules on top of somebody's head to see them dancing around when you can actually breathe in the anger when they walk in. And sometimes they're absolutely wonderful. And that's what it's about. This is also about when one act of anger, and I'm not talking physical abuse, but one act of road rage causes damage forever. People don't think about the collateral damage that's going to happen from things like this. This is told from 3 points of view. Maddie, a social worker, Ben, a public defender in Boston, and Emma, their 14-year-old daughter. I'm going to read 2 brief passages. The first one is from Maddie, the beginning of the book. Anger exhausted Maddie. She waited for the kiss of Xanax to kick in, Prince Charming bearing a sheath for her nerves. Ben hadn't cared if they had hot mayonnaise and slept in typhus-encrusted sheets when they were first married. Not while they burned off their early searing heat. He'd excited her, a public defender, demanding the world give his wrecked clients a break, a little justice, a fair shot. She could barely breathe around him. Some part of her always needed to touch some part of him. Her hand on his shoulder, an ankle casually leaning against the calf. Ben dwarfed everyone, racing through life with exclamation points coming at all sides. Poverty to the right, boom. Racism, pow. Dirty landlords, gotcha. Who knew all that passion and rage could be directed at a late car payment, a missing car button? Her. And now we have Ben. This, for those of you who actually live here, this takes place on the Jamaica Way. Anybody ever driven on the Jamaica Way? Then you know that even when things are good, it's hell. He's very angry because his wife has forgotten to get that little sticker that you put on your license plate. And I happen to know it's true. You actually can get pulled over for that, and they will tow your car away. You too? Yes. I had to call my husband and get me, but he did not, thank God, react like Ben. Although people think he does. People think he's a horrible person from just the way I write about characters. His cross to bear. This is Ben from the book On the Jamaica Way. 3 days later. Ben clenched the wheel hard enough to snap the plastic in half. He couldn't even look at her. For God's sake, how could you forget to do something so simple? How many times are you going to say the same thing? Until you get it through your head that you need to keep up with basic life tasks. I can't remind you of everything. Her chin jutted out. She didn't answer. Screw her. Ben sensed her actions, biting her lip, digging her nails into the skirt. Finally, she deigned to speak. You were too harsh with our daughter last night. Harsh is called for when she sneaks out of the house. I'm worried about Emma, about us. Tears trickled down her cheeks. Oh, Christ, not this again. He pounded the dashboard. She flinched. I came to get you, for God's sake. Isn't that enough? She began crying in earnest, stretching towards the back, trying to reach something. Guilt fought with irritation. He took one of those damn deep breaths she was always forcing on him. Look, I'm sorry for yelling. What are you doing back there? She ignored him, unbuckled her seatbelt, and got on her knees, rummaging around the back of the car. Maddie, Jesus, just get back in the seat. 1 second. She hoisted up her huge suitcase of a tote bag. It's a list of what I'm frightened of. With Emma, things I want to prevent. Pregnancy, drugs, tattoos. Did his wife have a magic social work formula to keep all these things at bay? I'm worried about her. And I'm not. You haven't cornered the market on parental concern, you know. It's not about you, Ben. Right. He looked in the rear mirror. A Ford Expedition barreled behind them, trying to push them. You humongous piece of crap. He sped up. Blinding rain pelted the windows. He set the wipers higher and opened the window to clear the side mirror. The expedition came closer, pushing him to go faster or move over. He hit the accelerator, but the stayed right with him. Air inside him expanded. He tapped his traction control button twice to turn on the competitive driving control, but the expedition sped up. All caution left, he rocketed. Competitive driving let him be in charge. No car computer slowed him from his fast moves. He might not be the athlete of the century, but he knew how to drive like a motherfucker. What did the kids say? Oh yeah, I got mad skills. The expedition almost kissed his bumper, both of them going 45 on a road posted at 25. The road opened up and he climbed over 50, then 55, and finally hit 60, but he couldn't lose the damn expedition. Ben, move over. Shut up. Just when the guy seemed ready to ram him, Ben pulled into the right lane. Metal scraped metal, and the oversized SUV hit them hard. He skidded on a slick spot, hydroplaned, and the car spun out of control. Cars ahead and to the right squealed, maneuvering away on the twisting road as his car careened toward a tree in the curve. Maddie screamed. Ben gripped the wheel as though death chased them. And that is the funny part of the book. So this is my third novel. I published my first book when I was 56, my first novel when I was 57. I actually published my first nonfiction when I was in my 20s. There was a bit of a gap for having kids, sending them to college, getting divorced, chasing bad men. You know, having bad boyfriends, I gotta tell you, it takes a lot of time. That alone could eat up like 20, 30, 40 years. Am I right? Yeah. So people often ask me, what was it like to publish your first book at 57? Well, first of all, you got to find an agent. That takes a long, long time. I got a wonderful agent and praise everything. She sold the book in 8 days. And I was really excited for 8 minutes. And then I thought, oh my God, what about my author picture? I mean, really, I thought, I'm too old, and the most important thing is that my author picture looked better. And so I started Googling how to look good in photos. Just so everybody knows, this is what you do to look good in a photo. Put your neck up straight, and it looks really weird until the picture's taken. And then your double chin really kind of goes away a little bit. So that's a really good thing I learned. And I started doing all sorts of things. I went and I had my hair cut by the Best of Boston. I won't say who. And I said, do anything, but don't make it short. So he immediately cut it really short. And I was very tense. And so I put my hair behind my ears, and I looked in, and I said, well, what do you think of it like this? And this Best of Boston hairdresser said, what, are you on the playground? To this day, I do not know the connection between putting your hair behind your ears and being on a playground, but I have been, as you can see, very scared since then. Then I had my makeup done, and then I went to Eileen Fisher, home of older Jewish women trying to look good. And I put myself at their mercy, you know, do something with this post-hippie woman. So I had this whole makeover, and then my sister and her partner were over, and my sister's partner said, so I'm curious, how much did it cost for all of this? And my husband was there. And there wasn't anything on God's earth that would make me say what it cost. And I'm sort of fumbling. And then my husband, God bless him, he said, oh, I know what it cost. And I said, really? And you're still married to me. And I said, what do you think it cost? And he said, it had to be at least $100. So now you know why what had that. My husband and I have a don't ask, don't tell policy about money, and separate accounts. Very, very important. So then I went to get my picture taken for my author picture. So scared. And my sister offered to take my picture, and she's a beautiful photographer, but mainly she takes animal pictures, and she loves people to look interesting. And I really, really didn't want to look interesting. I really wanted to look good. So I went to some photographer, and she had me doing all these things, like holding pens, like authors often do. This is what we do. When we write, we hold a pen like that. And she had me like leaning, another thing that we do. And she promised me I would look good, but I didn't know how I could because I was sweating so much. But she sent me the pictures, and I realized what she meant by looking good. Because what I looked in all these author pictures was dead. She had Botoxed me into an embalmed version of my mother in the coffin. And I started crying because I didn't want to look dead. I mean, I wanted to look younger, but I didn't really want to look dead. So I called my sister, got on my virtual knees, and I said, please come take my picture. And she did. And we learned things, like you use gold screens to bounce off. The filmmaker probably knows. And she did a great job. So, okay, there I was. I had an author picture that I didn't have to be ashamed of, and I didn't look embalmed, and I wasn't Photoshop Botox too much. And then I'm getting ready, and my 12-year-old publicist calls me, because they're all 12, and they're all named Megan. So 12-year-old Megan called me from St. Martin's Press, and she said, oh, I have your first, event. And I was very excited, and I thought, I'm probably going to be at like Harvard Bookstore. And she said, it's Blog Talk Radio. Anybody here know what Blog Talk Radio is? Anybody ever listen to Blog Talk Radio? Me either. And I said, okay, thank you, Megan. What's the show? And she said, the show is Feisty Over 50. So after spending thousands of dollars to try to pass, I went on Feisty Over 50. And, the woman was really, really nice. And after a few more events like this, I realized, you know what? I am over 50. Well, actually, I'm over 60 now. And such is life. So I now think of myself, instead of trying to hide my age, as somebody who makes people feel good. Because when I teach at Grub Street, and I tell them how old I was when I first published, they'll go, oh, thank God. So this is now why I'm on this earth, to make people feel better about themselves, okay? And now, any questions you have about publishing, makeup, because I've learned a lot about it, or hairstyling, or ways to pose for an author photo, I'm open to it. Any question at all. What does it take to be published? It takes a thick hide, being able to take a lot of rejection. It takes, first, to be published, you have to learn to write a really good book. So I have a lot of books in the drawer, and they're really, really, really bad. And I realized finally at one point that the reason they were so bad was that even though I had a bent towards writing, and I love to read, I was missing the tools, the proper tools. So I had to give myself what I call my homemade MFA. You can go on Huffington Post and Google Randy Susan Meyers homemade MFA, and you'll see what I then did. And then you write your book about 20 to 30 times. Seriously. And then you go looking for an agent. And for instance, The Help, I think she got rejected over 100 times, Catherine Stockett. So you get rejected a whole lot, and you hold on, and then you take all the critique in the world and you redo it again, and then if you're lucky, you get published. Unless you want to self-publish, at which point you can do it very quickly, but you might not have the product that people want as much. Harsh reality. Can I talk about my homemade MFA? Yes, I can. I was actually talking to Larry before this. I wasn't a very good student. I was very smart, very, very smart, but I hated school. So I had ignored a lot. But I learned really well by reading and self-teaching. So I bought about, well, in my office, my office sounds so fancy. In the room next to my bedroom, I have shelves and shelves. I probably have about 50 books I read. I wrote myself reports on the books. I wrote myself whole things on how to do it. I started at Boston Adult Ed, then I went to Cambridge Adult Ed, very bad experience. Then I went to Grub Street, just that one teacher. Then I went to Grub Street, started taking classes, and I spent, I'd say 6 years really devoting myself to studying and to reading like a writer. So I devoted myself to getting better in a very thought out way. Did I feel like a cognitive machine trying to learn at Grub Street? No, I feel like a cognitive machine when I go to a bookstore. I probably started going to Grub in 2006. And I actually at that point I paid no attention to anything. I was in a master novel workshop. We stayed together for years with Jenna Blum. We stayed together for years and years. I'm still in a writers group with some of those same people. We began Beyond the Margins. I think small. When I think about the people, it's all about the teacher, having a good teacher. If I didn't have a good teacher, like that's what happened to me at Cambridge, I would have just walked out. So it's really a one-on-one, it's really you and the students and the teacher. And I think if you have a bad experience with a teacher, you probably would feel that way. Is it easier to write fiction or nonfiction? For me, nonfiction is much easier. I write a lot of essays. I find it very much fun, because I get to do things like research and think of how smart I am. Whereas when I'm writing fiction, I am in a covenant with the reader. I need to come out with something that is enjoyable. I am not writing for myself, whereas my essays are really much more my think pieces, and they are for me. But fiction I think of as being for the reader, and only for the reader. For me as a reader, I write the kind of thing, I'm always in the middle of at least 3 books. You know, 1 fiction, 1 nonfiction, 1 Kindle. And so, if I'm not satisfying myself, and also I have a very tough writers group, really tough, and everybody's been published. You can imagine, jealous. Did I always know I wanted to write a novel? I felt, the way I grew up, I thought writing a novel was so out of my reach. I always dreamed of doing that, but I also dreamed of being a ballerina and an actress and Miss America. And so I didn't think any of those things would happen. I grew up in Brooklyn in a sort of a little bit of a tough way, and I was raised by the Brooklyn Public Library. They were very nice, you know. They wouldn't let me wear makeup till I was, you know, at least 15. They were very good mothers. So I always wanted to, but I kind of pretended not. And then once I hit my 20s, I really wanted to, but I really tamped it down because I was, you know, at one point I was working 3 jobs and raising the kids. I was a bartender for a long, you know. I was a bartender, and I was an accountant. I closed down a place because they never did their taxes. And then I started working for the city, and so I really just didn't have the time. But I had some great jobs. I ran the Mission Hill Community Center, is one of my favorite jobs of my life. Where I was very, very smart and hated school, where did I go to college? Well, the better question, Larry, where did I drop out from? So I dropped out of 2 places. The first place I dropped out of was CCNY. And I really loved CCNY because it was free then, and I got a Regents scholarship, and I used that money because it was free to go to school to go to California. So I was very pleased with that, and then I got married at 19. A very good decision. I mean, so excellent. And then I went back into to UMass Boston in my 20s, but at the same time I started writing my nonfiction book, which I co-authored. And it's under a different name because I was married to a different person. And I had to choose between writing that book, which I got a contract for, and raising my kids, or going to college and raising my kids. So I chose the writing. And then I kept thinking I'd go back again, but I kept getting really good jobs, so the smart part won out. Thank God. I also had some really crummy jobs, so I was lucky. What was my worst job? Oh, God, my worst job was working at Blimpie's fast food in New York and coming home smelling so bad that my mother would, I think she wanted me to take my clothes off outside, but I held on and I wouldn't do that. The second worst job I had was when I was in college, and it was a tie-dye factory, which sounded kind of cool. Oh, I'm going to work in the tie-dye factory. But what it meant was taking huge sheets and twisting them, and with giant rubber bands. I had so many bad jobs. I could just list forever, but those were my top 2 were, oh no, folding pajamas in Velma lingerie. Yeah, if you ever want to convince your child not to not drop out, send them to fold lingerie in a factory. And my husband says I don't fold well. Well, I am rebelling. What's my favorite author? Or book. My favorite, I have 2 favorite books that I reread a lot for the writing and because they just engage me. One is Mosquito by Paul Theroux, and it is the best coming of age told from the point of view of an adult with an insane father. And Paul Theroux he's actually local. He's a great writer. He grew up in Lynn, or someplace with an L. Lynn, Lawrence, Lowell. And my second is Before and After by Rosellen Brown, which takes a horrible story in a family and tells from 3 points of view. And I love the way she can show it all. And both of these were made into movies. So I think what that means is I have a good eye for books to be made into movies.
Have any of your books been optioned?
No, they haven't been optioned. A lot of places have looked at them and then said, oh, they're so dark. So next book is going to be like about a woman who finds an apple and eats it. The writing style, that's very easy. What's the writing style I like? Very intense, really reaching down, really not being afraid to hit the bones, never having a reader on. I can tell very quickly when I'm reading a book when the author has a writer on their shoulder. I mean, a reader on their shoulder, when they're worried about what the family's going to think about the sex scenes, when they're worried about what their children are going to think about writing, how much they hate, being a parent. I don't worry about any of that, which is probably why my family does not like me, but whatever, they spend the money. No, I really don't worry, because I have a very good relationship with my kids, and my parents are both dead. So I can write anything I want. I can really tell when an author is being facile and rushing through. So the writing that I like, it's not like there's one style I like. I also don't, I guess I'm talking about what I don't like. I also don't like writing that smacks of being an MFA writing, where they're more worried about every word than they are about the depth of the story and the characterization. How would I describe my writing style? Well, if you're looking to buy a book, I would describe it as just the best in the world. I would describe my writing style as deep, dark, and humorous. I don't know, that just came out. How does that sound? Should I trot that one out again? Yeah. Okay. Have I ever thought of writing something funny since I'm so funny? Well, you must know my cousin Phyllis. My cousin Phyllis wrote to me.
Probably do.
Oh, she's a BI, and she wrote to me and she said, you're really funny. I don't know why you have to write such awful books about such serious things. Why don't you write something nice? And I really wanted to write back to my cousin Phyllis and say, you know what, Phyllis? You've been a painter for all these years, and yet you still paint pictures of penises coming out of refrigerators. What's up with that? But since I am a secret BITCH and she's a outward one, I just wrote back and said, thank you for sharing that with me. So have I ever thought of writing a funny book? This sounds weird, but I write what I write. And there is a lot of funny stuff in my book. A lot of the reviews have said it. But what I am interested in, I don't know where the funny comes from. I think it's my family. We're so messed up that we joke about anything and everything. But when I write, what I want to explore are I think most writers explore their obsessions. And my obsession seems to be loss, anomie, looking for family, infidelity, adoption. I mean, those are my obsessions. The one I'm working on, I'm working on a book now, which I have to finish by December, so I may have to leave soon, which is about a woman who discovers that her husband, it takes their marriage over 40 years, and she learns they're very wealthy, that their entire fortune is based on a Ponzi scheme. And yes, it does have, that bit of Madoff in it, but I did all this financial research, and then I had to forget the real story, and that's been fascinating, because I was going to write just from the woman's point of view, and I wrote from his too. And then the one after that is going to be about two women who escape their homes because they're so sick of being obsessed with worrying about being fat. So that'll be funny, I guess, not. But there'll be funniness in it. Another one of my obsessions, wait. So, I'm just running through all my obsessions. Oh, and I have another idea I want to work on, which is a mother and daughter who grew up in a hippie commune, and the daughter moving away from everything her mother did and doing everything she can to be the most perfect person in the world, as her mother still walks around in, as the daughter calls them, rags. And so now you know my whole life. Unexpected sources of inspiration is TV. I'm serious. I watch. TV keeps my husband and I together, keeps our marriage together. You know, we like the same shows. We have shame shows. We can't admit them. But we both like really dark TV and really crazy TV. You know, like Breaking Bad was our church. You know, I mean, and you learn a lot when you watch, and that was so well written. That was the best written show I've ever seen. And I really learn a lot about sympathy for the devil, because I don't like one-note characters, and you have to really work carefully to build in sympathy for the devil. And so why did we care so much about Walter White, and yet we didn't care for Tuco, the one who with the turtle and the head? So TV, I say that I watch TV for my art. I found my literary agent the old-fashioned way, writing query letters, just like they tell you to do. And I wrote a lot of them. And we did actually have, we did have somebody in common, but all that does is get it read faster. Because I have sent many, many people to my literary agent, who she has said, thank you very much. So, but that's what I did. Excuse me? A good literary agent knows how to show you the money. What can I say? I mean, it's not all about the art. Thank you very much for sitting and schwitzing with me.
Like a cheap toy springing forward with a stuttering mechanical jerk, I'd send the ball bouncing erratically a few feet in front of me, like this. You know, or like, yeah.